Welcome back to my atelier of criticism, and I've just received an email from the office of YouTube's Chief Content Officer Robert Kinsell, who says, Dear Mr. Bradshaw, you should by now have received via DHL courier your complimentary bottle of Rosé Prosecco, for getting over 3,500 subscribers. However, many YouTubers are getting far more than this, and we have recently sent one film reviewer a brand new 3 Series BMW. Well, that's taken the edge off it. Happiness, loneliness and silliness come together in this first movie entitled Brian and Charles, developed by writer-performers David Earl and Chris Hayward from their 2017 short film of the same name and directed by Jim Archer. The film is about an AI robot called Charles and his creator Brian, and thankfully, unlike a lot of serious sci-fi, this film doesn't demand that we wonder whether or not AI robots are capable of independent thought, or if you can fall in love with them, etc., etc., etc. Charles, the free-thinking robot, is burdened with many things, but an ontological crisis isn't one of them.
My name's Brian. This is my infamous inventions pantry. It's actually a cowshed. Things went a bit topsy-turvy in my life and I was very alone. Ah, fiddlesticks. That's when I just started making stuff. Any little idea I had, I just made. It's an egg bell, pinecone bag, flying cuckoo clock. So whenever anyone in the village wants to know the time, they can look up in the air and I'll be there. Get back! It's on fire! They don't always work, and the stuff I build isn't for everyone.
Well, I'm impressed.
Thanks. My new project, I'm building a robot. Didn't look too bad, does he? I wonder what he'll do when I turn him on.
David Earl himself plays Brian, a nerdy middle-aged bloke who lives by himself in a Welsh cottage that he has all too clearly inherited from his late parents. He talks directly to an interviewer behind the camera with a strange, self-aware, nervous giggle. Earl has worked with Ricky Gervais on TV a fair bit, and like many who have come into the great man's orbit, as a performer, he has perhaps acquired some David Brent mannerisms to go with the sentimental special needs comedy. Poor Brian has recently come through some tactfully unspecified emotional crisis and has now thrown himself into his hobby, inventing things. He has developed an egg belt, that is, a belt for keeping eggs in, and a pinecone bag, a bag with pine cones glued to it, which is not an invention so much as a design concept. He has attempted a flying bicycle, but it is only when he is foraging from raw materials from fly-tipped rubbish and discovering a glove and a mannequin's head that he is inspired to attempt his masterpiece, a robot. Like a mixture of Caractacus Potts and Victor Frankenstein, Brian works day and night in his shed on his creation, which he calls Charles. Brian does his best to keep Charles in a state of E.T.-type secrecy and disguise, but his creature catches the eye of a horrible neighbourhood bully called Eddie, and devotees of folk horror will be unnerved to hear that Eddie hosts a big annual bonfire. Charles is a fascinating figure, the laughs coming from the tiny head on the giant body and the robotic voice with its sing-song falling tone mannerisms, nicked from Stephen Hawking. Charles looks a bit like an aged and unaristocratised version of Ray Allen's sinister ventriloquist dummy Lord Charles, but it was only a third of the way into the film that it really hit me. With his wispy hair around his bald head, Charles looks exactly like the late Oberon Waugh, son of Evelyn, editor of the Literary Review. In fact, he sounds a bit like Oberon Waugh too. Has Brian dug up Oberon Waugh's dead body to create Charles? Because once the resemblance is seen, it can't be unseen, and it caused me to become slightly hysterical. It isn't easy to develop a sketch-length idea into a feature film, and not easy to pivot from ironic comedy into dark Straw Dog's menace, and then into a sweet-natured happy ending. But David Earl, Chris Hayward and Jim Archer have managed it. It's very funny, unexpectedly dramatic, and basically the bromance of the year. Taika Waititi directed in 2017 what still strikes me as the best MCU movie, Thor Ragnarok, and also the superb and franchise-igniting vampire romp What We Do in the Shadows a few years before that. Both comedy gold and way better than his misjudged and overrated middlebrow panzer crash Nazi satire Jojo Rabbit. Now Waititi has directed an entertaining follow-up to his Thor masterpiece, Thor, Love and Thunder, and like the first film, it's a tongue-in-cheek cosmic spectacular in the tradition of Mike Hodges' Flash Gordon, with some nice gags, big cameos, and Chris Hemsworth returning to deliver his easygoing turn as the great flaxen-haired Norse god himself. And of all the Hollywood movie stars currently taking the MCU shilling, Hemsworth is the most utterly unembarrassed by it, most visibly enjoying himself, most utterly relaxed in his own skin and in front of his own green screen.
He was no ordinary man. He was a god. After saving planet Earth for the 500th time, Thor set off on a new journey. Well, he got in shape. He went from dad bod to god bod. And after all that, he reclaimed his title as the one and only Thor. Oh, spoke too soon.
Jane?
Thor has to confront the evil Gore the God Butcher, played by Christian Bale, who with his terrifying necro sword is slaying divinities all over the shop. His new team includes Valkyrie, played by Tessa Thompson, and Korg, played by YTT himself, and also his ex, Dr. Jane Foster, played by Natalie Portman, whose cancer has been put into remission by the mighty cosmic powers of Thor's once shattered hammer, Mjolnir. This film is probably on its strongest ground with its most purely absurd touches, such as the squabbling rivalry between Thor's old weapon, the hammer Mjolnir, and his new weapon, the axe Stormbreaker, which is always suspiciously crowding into the frame when Thor starts swoonily hanging out with Mjolnir, unable to accept that Mjolnir is with Dr. Foster now. Thor himself has conquered his weight issues and is now a fine figure of alpha maledom, who literally makes young goddesses faint in one scene by disrobing and revealing to them his manhood, or rather his godhood. The movie is effectively ruled by one cameo, which it would be unsporting to reveal here. The figure of Zeus, our A-lister guest star, unveils one of his strangest accents yet, but also gets serious laughs. And yet it has to be said that however adroitly YTT plays it, Marvel's comedy mode is in danger of becoming a reflex, a style which can almost be enabled in the settings menu of the Marvel software. It's a highly contained form of restricted self-satire or auto-undercutting, which is always offset by the huge and deadly serious CGI intergalactic action scenes. This is becoming a bit of a cul-de-sac, but that isn't to say it isn't still funny, and Thor still delivers a hammer blow of humour. Jane Austen's calm, subtle novel Persuasion gets the Bridgerton, Fleabag, Bridget Jones treatment in this smirking rom-com with more wrong notes than an inebriated squadron of harpists, including everything but a last-minute rush in a barouche to Bath Airport.
I'm Captain Wentworth and I am handsome.
Captain, meet Anne.
Actually, we've met. Long ago, not before I was handsome.
Your face has matured.
Your hair remains intact.
Your hair is also suitably appropriate.
You still have jam on your face.
Now we're worse than exes. We're friends.
Frederick!
Perfect.
Our demure protagonist Anne Elliot, played by Dakota Johnson, is forever doing supercilious takes and wry monologues to camera, taking despairing swigs from a bottle of red wine in private, occasionally nursing a quirky pet rabbit, and at the end, unforgivably, gives us a wink to seal the deal of our adoringly complicit approval. The final wedding scene gives us a cutesy reveal to the effect that it's not our hero and heroine getting married, a comic twist I suspect pinched from the ending of Amy Heckerling's Austen homage, Clueless, and involving two distinct characters whose status and purpose this film therefore gets very wrong. The casting in itself isn't wrong. Dakota Johnson looks and sounds the part of Anne, who 8 years before had been persuaded to turn down a marriage proposal from the handsome but penniless sailor Wentworth, in which role Cosmo Jarvis does an honest job with a touch of Colin Firth/Hugh Grant in his shy yet grumpy reticence. Now Wentworth has returned to the neighbourhood, newly wealthy, prestigiously promoted in the Navy, and reportedly still in search of a wife, to lonely Anne's mortification. Meanwhile, her family has fallen on hard times due to the spendthrift snob father Sir Walter Elliot, amusingly impersonated by Richard E. Grant. Her selfish sister Mary, scene-stealingly played by Mia McKenna Bruce, takes her away to Lyme, where the pretty sisters of her brother-in-law Charles, Ben Bailey Smith, involve Wentworth in diversionary romantic attractions. Her cousin William Elliot, Henry Golding, a smug claimant to her father's baronetcy, makes advances, and she is still actually close to the mentor who disastrously persuaded her against Captain Wentworth in the first place, and this is Lady Russell, Nikki Amuka Bird, who in this version is someone who makes cougar sex tourist visits to Europe off camera. Jane Austen books shouldn't be holy writ for adaptations. The Clueless movie and Curtis Sittenfield's underrated comic novel Eligible show how you can take a free hand, and this film's Bridgerton-style diverse casting arguably engages with the novel's historical themes of imperial entitlement, properties in the West Indies, naval plunder and privateering. But as far as style goes, there is something very smug, misconceived and unpersuasive about it. And so we draw to a close. Please give this vlog a like and a share on your many influential social media platforms. And very important, hit that subscribe button viciously hard and leave a comment to say that you've subscribed. And also, buy my book, The Films That Made Me, an edited selection of my essays and reviews from The Guardian. See you next week.